So hi there and welcome to today's art class. Today's class is all about looking at eyes, and we're actually painting this picture today. This is the eye of one of my students' dogs. His name's Bailey, or her. Oh, didn't realise which one that would be. Anyhow, this is Bailey's eye, and this is Lynn's puppy. We were talking a few weeks ago about painting eyes because eyes are so interesting to do. And I thought, and Lynn sent me this photo, so I thought, oh, that's a good one. Let's jump in and do that. So welcome to today's class. You'll have your notes handy like this, hopefully, and you want those that you can prop up in front of you and you'll be able to see the images nice and clearly. You can see there's also a black and white version there. So up here on the top right, I've put a black and white or grayscale version of the image there for you as well. The reason for that is because the first part of the class is all about charcoal, and we're actually going to draw it in black and white first as a little practice run, and then we're going to go into the colour version. So we're doing two drawings today pretty much. And the other reason for the black and white version is so that you can find your tones. So by tone, I mean all the lights and the darks and all the greys in between. Tone or value, it is often called, is very important in your paintings. And you can see on that black and white picture that we've got some really bright light tones up here above the eye. And there's some little bits just below the eye as well. And then we've got that lovely shine on the eyeball. They're all the really bright light tones. And then we've got all our beautiful dark tones, mostly around the edges and then in around the eye as well, and in amongst some of the fur. And then we've got mid-tones. So all the tones are what make things look 3D. They're the things that actually draw your eye and make things look real. So tone is really important. And then we talk about converting tone into colour when we move into the pastels. But for this part of the class, we're going to just do a quick drawing in your art diary or onto a piece of cartridge paper. So I'll have my picture propped up in front of me so I can see that nice and clearly. And on my art diary or paper, I'm just going to draw a section on here that would be around about the same proportions as our picture today. I'm looking around for my ruler and realise that I've left it over there on my table, so I'm going to go and pick that up. What you want to do is draw a grid line on there. So that's a halfway line between your top and bottom and your sides. I don't know where I've put my ruler. I think I was tidying up and put everything away. There's one. Rulers are very helpful. They will help you measure and find the centre points, get your line nice and straight if you need to have straight lines. So always have a ruler handy. Once you've drawn up your little area that you're going to draw in, then you want to grab your ruler and just pop a line down the middle either way. Now, if you want to measure that out and get it precise, by all means do that. I like to be a little bit more relaxed at this point when I'm just rehearsing my painting. I've got pastel all over my eraser, so now that's marked on my page, never mind. So this is just a nice loose little exercise where we get to study the picture, figure out where everything sits and do a bit of drawing. So once you've got your crosshairs drawn up or your grid line, you can see on your picture, I'll just bring it over so you can see what I'm talking about. The eye sits inside, mostly inside this bottom right-hand corner. So you can see most of the eye shape is in the top corner of this segment. And then we've got a top section of it in the right-hand corner, only a tiny little bit in the top left corner, and then the other part of the bottoms of it on the left-hand side. So when you break your picture into quarters like this, it means that I can actually block everything off and just do one little piece at a time rather than trying to figure out where the eye has to be inside that area. So if you want to add more grid lines to that, you can actually add more and break it down into smaller sections, and that will help you even further. So when a painting or a picture has a lot more detail, I like to break it down a little bit more and give myself more information so that I can get everything in the right place easier. Okay, so based on that theory, if we just look at this bottom right-hand quarter, so just looking at this section here, I can see that the eye area comes from the center in that far, which is not quite half. I'm looking at the pupil of the eye. If I find my halfway mark, then I can bring it back in a little bit here. So I'd say it comes to about there. So that would be where I'd say the edge of the eyeball comes to. That's this section here. Okay. And then this area, if I go down to the middle line, so this bit here, and if I measure down just by eye, or you can do it with a ruler, how far down inside that part does the eyeball go to? And I'd say it's about a third, 1/3, 2/3. I'd say that'd be about a third of the way down in this section here. So if we break that down into thirds, that's about 1/3, that's about 2. So I'd say it's about there. So that gives us 2 points that we can actually intersect on the grid line with. And you'll notice the shape of the eye has a lovely curve on it. So that's when we want to start at this area and then curve around over onto that other point that we found. So that's how we can get that edge of the eye in the right spot. And you can see there's also a little white section here. So what we can do then is look again at the grid line and see how far in that starts. And it's quite reasonable size. So it comes in at about the halfway line on the grid, comes down and it tapers off, doesn't it? Underneath the iris. So we've got that little white area there. So on this particular picture, there's not a whole lot of really hard lines. We've got a definite shape around the eye, but then pretty much everything else is all soft and furry. So there's no hard lines, there's no really hard, sharp areas that we need to draw in. What we'll be looking at then is the tone and blocking in. Okay, so let's stay in this section first. I've got my eye down to here. I feel like I need to bring that down a little bit more, but it's probably not right because once we bring it up into this section, it'll look right. And then we've got the pupil. So the pupil sits here inside this section here. So it's just inside the halfway line where it crosses that line. And then it comes to about there. So we can draw the bottom part of that pupil. So it's a lovely round shape through here. So that's the pupil section. And now we're going to just look at the other shapes around the eye. So I can bring, there's a big thick line under this section here. I can draw that in just through there. It's got a little shine on it and we can put that in after if you filled it in already. And that's pretty much all the information we need to put into that area there, other than just a few little soft marks. So I can grab a shorter fat piece of charcoal. This is my skinny piece that I was drawing with before. So it behaves a little bit like a pencil and I can use the tip of it and get quite a fine line. But if I want a thicker line, then I like to use these shorter fat pieces of charcoal and start to sort of just gently, gently blur in some of the shapes. So by holding this down on my paper, and then I'm tilting it slightly because what I want is a soft mark. I don't want a hard line like I would get if I used the end of it. So I just want a soft mark and I'm just tilting it a little bit. So I'm just tilting it towards one end to get that lovely shading kind of effect. And then I can come down here and notice that it's quite dark under here. So press a little bit firmer there. And where else is it dark? It's dark down through here. So I'm just looking inside this little quarter. I mean, it's kind of mid-tones everywhere, but it's darkest down here at the bottom left of that quarter. And then we have this little dark area over on this side. So as you get to the edge of your page on the right-hand side, I've got a nice dark patch there. And then it's kind of all mid-tone everywhere else, except for that shiny little white area on the inside of the eye. I'm not going to worry about putting all the hair marks in at this point. We just want to be looking at the tones. Okay, so where I said there's a white mark, if you've covered that up with your charcoal, you can get a kneadable eraser. So they're kneadable because you can knead them like dough, and we do knead them as well. So they're two purposes, two needs. And you can actually use that to get a little, shape the end of it and just kind of take out some of the charcoal so that you can get your white back from your page. And so you can keep reshaping it. These kneadable erasers pick up all the pigment or charcoal that you take off, because what these do is they take the pigment off the paper. They don't actually rub the paper. So they don't damage the paper, which is wonderful, but you've got to keep kneading it because they get so dirty. So you've got to kind of keep finding a clean edge to do the next thing. And then you can kind of draw with it almost. They're quite wonderful to get your whites back in. And then I can darken off again. And while we're darkening off, let's have a look at the iris around the eye. So we're just going to darken off in there. That's also a mid-tone. It's a little orangey sort of colour. And it's a darker kind of brown around the pupil. And then the pupil actually looks blue. I don't know if that's actually blue or if it's blue because of the light from the camera, maybe. Anyway, it's a darker tone. So that's pretty much the bottom quarter of that section that we've done. So now let's move up into the top right area. And again, we're just going to follow this line around. We're going to see where everything comes to on the grid line. So I'm looking at the eye. Let's look at the pupil. We'll continue that on. So that comes up in through here. And it's probably sitting on the halfway line, actually, just about. Yep, pretty much. It's a little bit above, or sorry, below the halfway line. But let's pop the pupil there. So that comes up above that grid line there. And then we can continue. Let's have a look at where this intersects. So at the top of the eye here, we've got an intersection just there, which is around about there. It's almost level with the top of the pupil. So we have this line coming through here. And then it kind of curves up a little bit and then down. So I've got this curvy up and down sort of shape just here. I might have exaggerated that a little bit, but that's pretty much what we're looking for. And then we can continue that down into the tear duct area. Okay, so you can see how when you break everything down into a shape, it actually becomes a lot easier to draw. If we thicken up this line above the eye, so that's the eyelid, and we'll continue that on into the other quarter soon. And then we can just shade in the eye again, continue that shading of the eye to get those beautiful tones and variations there, and darken off around the pupil because it's quite black around the edges of the pupil. And then we've got that lovely blue. The blue's nice. And then if you want to play, you can make a little point with your kneadable eraser and dot on there to get the shine in the eye. You could do that now or you can do it later. I like to save those things for later. I think it's more fun when you get to the end and you can kind of go, oh, let's put the highlights in, and that's when everything seems to come alive. Okay, so now just looking around the top of this area here, this is where all the light hair is, or the light fur in that forehead area. So what I'm going to do is just get my short bit of charcoal again and just zhoosh that around. So I'm just got it on its side so I can cover a larger area with it while it's on its side. And then where it's darker, you can kind of press harder and make your mark blacker. Okay, so just zhoosh it around. Just notice the direction of the hair that's growing there and kind of pull your charcoal around in that direction. That'll help to create the feeling of the fur as we build up the layers. And it's also good practice for when we do the pastel. Okay, So that's that bit. And then we've got a little bit of dark just through here. So it's a bit darker there. It's a bit darker above the eye. Got a lovely dark area just up on the right, top right corner. It's nice and dark through there. So when you want something to shine or be lighter, often it's easier to make the other thing around it darker. You know, when you sometimes you just can't get something light or white enough, you think, why? It's just not glowing like I want it to. If that happens, darken the thing around it, and often it'll start to pop and come alive. It's amazing the difference it makes when you add the dark to the light. All right, so we've got those 2 quarters done pretty much. That's enough information for now. That's all we really need to get in there. As I said, this is just a little practice run. You could potentially turn this into a painting if you love charcoal, and charcoal is a beautiful medium, so don't ever discount it. You know, it's actually a really lovely medium to work with, and quite a challenge too, because you don't have colour. So there's always the challenge of finding the tones and the different levels of grey, and it's a lovely thing to do. So don't discard that. Okay, so let's move over to the other quarter now. We're looking at, I'll keep going over here on the top left one. So pretty much there's not a whole lot of information in there. You can see it, the top of the eyelid just comes through down to about there, within that area. And then the rest of all of this top left quarter is just fur. So again, looking at tone. So when you look at your black and white version, you can see that the top left, or the left side of most of that, is fairly dark. And then as it comes across, it just gets a little bit lighter, and then we've got all those beautiful shiny bits that we can add in afterwards if you happen to fill them in at this point. Okay, so that's pretty much all the real information we need to get through there. You can put a few little hair kind of marks if you want to. I'm still using my short chunky bit of charcoal, and I'm just twisting it to its side and pressing a bit harder to get a few finer lines. And then again, as I said, if you want something to be lighter, just put darker next to it. Just make the thing next to it be darker, and the light will come through. Okay. And then if you wanted to, you could again grab your kneadable eraser. This is only a small piece of a whole eraser, because you can pull little bits off. Find a nice sharp edge, make a nice sharp edge with your fingers, and then literally just draw lines. And you'll need to keep getting a clean edge as you do that, because it picks up the charcoal, and it'll literally put it back down on the paper if you want to add it back in. So you can do that kind of thing and just get some of the little highlights happening through there. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on that though. We'll do more work on that when we do the colour section. All right, and then we've got our bottom 4th quarter to go, and then we'll have a complete charcoal sketch. So it's lovely to be able to kind of work your way around the picture and just do pieces at a time, and then it just all sort of comes together, doesn't it? All right, so we've got the top eyelid there on the top left quarter. So we're going to come down now and kind of join that on to the eye here at the back. So we've got this lovely little curve. We've already got everything else in place, so we know where that's all we've got to sit in relation to each other. So lovely curve around here. And then we've got another little line down through there. See that one just inside the iris there? Comes down. So that's our iris. All of this section in here. And there's a little bit of like the white of the eye, but it's not white. It's nothing like white. It's nearly the same colour as the iris actually. And so that's dividing the eye into those 2 segments. And then we've got the beautiful bottom part of the eye. So where the shine is on the outline of the eye, where you might put eyeliner. So that's really lovely and dark through there. So we can darken that up. It's also quite thick or wide. So we can widen that up as well and join that up with the other one on the other side. So I'm just going to go back in now to that right-hand side where we first started and continue that line through there. And so now we've got our eye in place. So it wasn't that hard at all, was it? Cool. And then around the eye, see this area here, I'm just using my pointy bit of charcoal because I want to get these little hairs here are quite fine. And you can do some really nice movement with your charcoal to get little hairy marks in there. So I'm just rubbing it back and forth, pressing pretty hard to get it darker. And darkening off around that section there. And then we've got a lighter section, so I'm going to pick up my other piece now and just lie that down flat. It's always good to have a shorter, fat piece because then you can kind of lie it on the paper and cover a lot more space. And then I'm just going to pull that out to the side as well because all the little hairs on the left-hand side there are kind of pulling out. And I'm just going to carry on into the corner. I might just leave that dark there because we've got what might be the side of something, lounge maybe, where the dog is leaning on it. So nice and dark through here. And then you can do a few little, continue on to that dark section right at the bottom there. Bring that round from the other side where we first started, just down in here and on the cheek. And then pull that through like that. And so that is essentially our little sketch done. And it's a really nice way to rehearse how you're going to paint this and just have a little check on where everything is and how it sits and what it's going to look like. So I think that might work out quite nicely. It's quite surprising how much space the eye takes up in comparison to everything else, because when you first look at pictures of eyes, the eye is all you see and you really don't focus on the other, furs and things around it unless your attention is brought to it. So it's interesting to note that often the focal point isn't always the largest thing in the picture. I'm just using my eraser here to take out some of the charcoal to make it a little bit lighter in that area there. But we'll do more work on that afterwards, as I said before. And then you kind of just wander around, keep checking your tones. So now we've got all of this in place, and before we move on to the next section, just check your tones. Make sure you've got enough dark where it needs to be dark, and that way you can get more light back in. Darken it off if it needs to be blacker. And just really have a good look at that and using your black and white picture. So focusing on that now, we used the colour one for the drawing to get everything in the right spot, but now you can use your black and white picture and really see where it's super dark and super light and everything in between. And that way you'll get much more drama and emphasis in your work if you follow the lights and the darks. It just makes it more interesting. And if you're using willow charcoal, you'll find that, willow doesn't get really, really black. You have to press pretty hard to make it black. Okay, so I'm just darkening off the pupil or the iris of the eye because it's actually quite mid-tone. There's no real light in that one, except for that little bit of shine on the left. And then we've got the dark pupil. And as I said, when you want to darken off the pupil, sometimes it's hard to get it really dark, especially with willow, because it's such a soft charcoal. And then I can darken off across the top here. So I'm pressing pretty hard to make that nice and dark. Lovely. Okay, so I can put my light back in. If you lost your light, you can use your eraser and just dab that a little bit and then do a little bit of light around here. And that'll probably be enough for that for now, because I'd really like to move on to the colour version. I think that's going to be fun. And we'll have to do a fair bit of blocking in because we're going to fill the whole page with pastel. And yeah, it's going to need a fair bit of blocking in before we kind of work up towards the detail. So that's that part. Let's move on to the next section. Keep this reference image nearby if you want to keep checking that as you go, because it's really good to have that to look at. I'm just going to leave it there for now because I want to talk about colour and what we're going to use for this pastel. So I picked out some colours a little earlier, and these are pretty much based on what I can see, in the image there. Now this is just printed on regular computer paper. So you'll find when you do that and you print onto normal paper from a basic printer, you're not going to get really vibrant colours. So sometimes it's a really good idea to put the picture onto an iPad or another screen, or use better quality paper and adjust your print settings to get a really, bright kind of vibrant print. Because the better you can see the colours, then, the better your painting will be. And I like to kind of enhance my colours. When they're all a bit dull and boring, it's not that exciting. So I like to try and keep them nice and bright. So these are the ones I picked for this picture. So I've put them in order from dark to light, so you can see my tonal range. And by tonal range, I mean the range from darkest all the way through to mid-tones, all the way through to the lightest. So if I keep them in that order, which is not easy, I usually mess them all up as I go and they end up everywhere. But if you try to keep your colours in order, it's much more useful, because then you can figure out where the tones are, and the tones are what are important. So let's start at the top. I've got white. White is for the highlights. It's for the little dot in the eye and, the bit of shine on the fur. I'm not going to use a lot of white until the end, or to get the lights on. I've got this lovely yellowy colour because I can see some sort of golden light through the fur. And when I'm picking my colours, I like to kind of hover them over my picture. I know that's not exactly the right yellow, but it's kind of probably be enough if I add a bit of white or my other colours over it to try and achieve that sort of effect. My next lightest is this one. So this is more like a skin tone kind of colour. And again, I can see that in my picture. I'll just move it over a bit. I can see that through here. That's that brownish kind of sandstone sort of colour. So that there's some of it in the eye and there's some of it in the fur. So that's a good option. If you're not sure of tone, I'm just trying to figure out which one of these comes next, which one is the lightest. To do that, I'm squinting at them. I'm going to say this one. It's hard to tell sometimes because they're all a bit close in tone. That's a beautiful, like a mid-grey, warm grey, sort of a browny grey colour. So I can see lots and lots of that throughout there. So when you put that over the picture, it kind of just merges in, doesn't it? So I can see lots of that one in there. I can also see green. Now, I don't know whether that's my printer or not, probably is, but I can see a fair bit of this olivey green colour down in through here. And it's also a really nice mid-tone. It's slightly lighter than this one, so it'll look nice over the top of it if I want to get a few highlights in there. So I'm going to stick with that one. And then I've got a bit of orange now. The orange I can see in the eye and maybe a little bit under the fur. So I picked that one up for that reason. And this one is more like a mustard. So it's kind of a mustardy, browny yellow colour. And again, I can see quite a bit of that throughout the fur and in the eye. So those all there are kind of my mid-tones. They're the ones that are going to do most of the work and get the fur working for me. I also grabbed this blue. Now, there's blue in the eye, but blue is often a lovely one to use underneath your browns for a bit of a shadow, a bit of warmth. So I grabbed that. This is an ultramarine, beautiful blue. But yeah, I thought I'll pop that in here and there just for some warmth. And then, of course, I've got blue violet, so that's my favourite dark one. beautiful. It's a deep violet and it's nice and dark, so it looks nearly black sometimes. And that will be lovely in all my dark areas. So I'm going to block in my darks with this one. And then I've got black. So black will be good for around the eye and just to get some of those really darks happening in there and make the eye pop against the lighter colours. So that is my little palette. When I pick out my palette, I like to put it all into a little container like this, because then I've got all my colours in the one place, and if I don't get it finished today, I can come back tomorrow and it's all still sitting there ready to go. So, you know, try to keep your colours nice and separate and easy to see and within reach. And if in order, if you can. I always start off that way, but it never ends there. And the other thing you might want is a bit of charcoal and, of course, your kneadable eraser, which I need to find a new one of because this one's getting pretty grubby. So that will be our little toolbox for today. The other things you might probably will want, if you have them, are some pencils. So if you can just find a brown maybe and a white or a light yellow, something like those. That's a white charcoal. That might help just to get a few of those furry effects going on as we build up the layers. You can use the pastels to do that though. I tend not to grab my pencils too often. I don't know why. I just probably too lazy to go and find them, to be honest. But I usually manage to make it work with pastels. Yeah. And I've also got a black pencil just in case. Is that black? I think it's black. It might be really dark blue, but something dark just for around the eyes and things like that if you want to get a harder line and something a little bit more defined. So that is the colour palette for today. What we might do is now move on to, no, actually I'm going to leave that there and we'll go and have a little break so that you've got that for reference. My paper colour I decided would be this one. So it's a lovely terracotta. And again, I think that will work really well with the picture because it's got a lot of that orange base in it, that nice brown and orange base. So that's my paper colour. Doesn't really matter what you use because we're going to colour it all in anyway, fill it all up. But sometimes you can leave some of it undone and rely on the paper colour underneath to show through. And that's always a nice option too. So black would be great, grey, even an aubergine or a purple or any kind of brown. So don't stress if you haven't got the same paper colour. So I shall leave all of those there so that you can get ready to do the next bit, which will be gridding up the page and then starting the drawing. So if you want to get on with that, you're welcome to do that. But we'll have a little 10-minute break and I'll come back and see you very soon. Okay, so we're all ready to go and got our colours picked out, pencils put to the side. Try to keep everything close by so that it's easy to reach. And I'm going to pop my little art diary away. Next thing you're going to need, if you haven't got this done already, is to tape your paper down onto your board. Okay, so I've just got some used tape from last time there. I like to just keep it flat on my board so I don't have to hold it down. So a little bit of tape on the corners is handy if you're working on a table and you're working flat. If you are working on an easel or something that's upright, then you're probably better to tape it all the way around. When you do that, try not to stick the tape down too hard. Or if you get new tape like this is masking tape, different kind, but same thing. Tear off a little piece and then just stick it onto your tablecloth or your clothing, just to get some of that adhesive off so it doesn't stick too much, because it can sometimes tear the paper. And then just press it down nice and lightly so that it's going to be easy to peel off later and not damage your art. Okay, so there's my paper ready to go. First thing we want to do now is draw up a grid line. So I'm going to use charcoal. So the willow charcoal I had earlier is a good option for drawing your pastel. because it comes off the paper nice and easily and doesn't tend to stain it too much. When you press pastel down really hard onto this gritty paper, it can kind of stick really well, which is great. But if you want to get it off, it's a little bit tricky sometimes. So I'm just finding my halfway lines. That's why charcoal's a better option. It just comes off nice and easy. And if you press only very lightly, it's even better. So I've lined up my grid and I've got that now drawn on nice and light in charcoal. Next thing we want to do is make sure you've got your picture handy. And again, we're going to do the same process with drawing this up. So just like we did before with the charcoal, we're going to figure out where everything sits within the grid line, and then we can start to block in with our pastels. So let's find those pointer marks again. Let's have a look at the eye, or this area here on the eye. So that's, well, actually, let's go to this one because it looks more like it's halfway. So find your halfway mark. Now, that could be done with a ruler or eye, whatever works for you. If you want to be more precise, then a ruler is probably a better option. So halfway for me is there. That's the outside of the eye, the outline of where the tear duct starts. And then we're going to come in and find the point where the iris crosses the line. So that's about there. So we've got a little gap there. We've just got this little triangle piece there, haven't we? Look at shapes, you can see that. That's this white of the eye here. And then the bottom of the iris comes across to about a third of the way down on this section here. So if I find a third, I'd say it's about there. That's going by eye. Let's see how right I was. So that's 11.5, make it 12-ish. Close, pretty about there. So that's the third line. And again, I can draw this in with my charcoal. So what I'm going to do is join the dots basically. So join the dots, bring that line around through there. And that's the bottom of my eyelid, my bottom eyelid there. And then I can bring around the iris through there, and it comes up to just there. So that's that shape there. That's the iris. We've got the eye, bottom of the eye with a little bit of the white showing. And then we've got the pupil. So the pupil starts here, about that far in from the center line, and about that far in. Is it about a quarter? One. Yeah, it's probably about a quarter. So I'd say about there. So that continues around like that. Okay. It's a nice little circular shape for that bottom section. That's all we need to put in at this point. We'll do the rest with pastel and blocking colours. This is the detail stuff we're doing right now. Okay, so then we're going to move up into this top right quarter and continue with the eye. So the line of that comes across to here. Now see where it crosses over the top of the eye. I'm just going to prop this picture up in front of me so I can see it nice and clear. Always have your photo close by so you don't have to move your eyes or your head too far to look at it. Okay, so it comes up and then it comes down and it crosses over here. So this is the top of the eyelid, where the eyelid and the top of the eye meet. Okay, so I've just got this lovely kind of arched shape. I probably made it a bit too arched there, and down, and it tapers off over to there. Okay, so that's that section in this area here. And then I'm going to continue with my pupil and bring that up into the top section here. And now I've noticed that I've probably gone a bit high there because that needs to sit on top of my pupil. So I can bring that down a tad lower. And I'll show you then if you want to erase your mark with your kneadable eraser, then it's pretty easy to get it off. You can just actually dab it like that. So you can dab it onto your paper. Keep finding a clean side and it'll kind of pick it all up nicely. And so that can come down a little bit lower. Down through there. Lovely. So that's about all the information we need to get in for that section there. We've got you know, the shape of the tear duct coming down through that section there that I didn't put in before, and a little dark area there, but that can all be blocked in with pastel. So we'll come across here and then onto this side, into this top right quarter, sorry, top left quarter. There's not much information in there at all as far as the eye goes, just continues a line across to there. And then it intersects here and comes down through there. Okay, and then we have a little bit of the white of the eye. So see the little edge there, and then it all kind of joins up at the base, just through there. So that's the basic shape that we need to have drawn in according to where everything sits within the grid line. And now we've got that in there, we can literally pick up pastels and start to block in different areas. So keep your charcoal nearby. You might want that again later just to get some more detail in there or some finer lines. Charcoal and pastel do work nicely together, so you can always use charcoal with pastel as you go. Cool, cool. All right, so now what we want to do, just going to round that out a little bit more, is grab your dark pastel, so not your black one, we're going to keep black for the blackest. We want your blue violet or something as dark as that. You might have a really dark blue or a really dark green or a really dark brown, anything that's really dark. So it's going to be one of your darkest colours in your tonal range. Okay, so this is my blue violet. And what we're going to do now is literally, you just want a short piece. So if you've got long sticks, just break them, if you can, into shorter sticks. I know it's a bit heartbreaking when you've spent money on them, but it's easier to work with, because what we want to do is keep it flat on the paper and just rub it on the sides. And don't press too hard. So this is where you kind of want to be, you know, just frugal with your pastels. You don't want to fill it all up just yet. So don't go too crazy. Just press light, nice and light, and notice where it's darkest. So this colour goes down where you can see all the dark bits. Okay, so in the top left corner there is quite a bit of dark. We'll put light back over that where we've got little light pieces showing through. But we're looking at the background now, and we really just want to get a nice bit of dark tone or texture going on underneath the background. Okay, and then across here on the, I've just put a little bit, smushed a little bit down through here. It's good to kind of get it nearly everywhere because we're going to push it all around. So see there's a little shape running around like that through there. And then it's also got a shadow across. I'm just going to put a harder line so you can see what I'm talking about through there. So that's a little shadow area there where the edge of the dog's face is sitting on a lounge or something. So it's quite dark there where those two things meet. It's really quite black in there. And then as we come around into the bottom right, you can see there's a dark patch down through here. So again, just rub your pastel over that area. You want to, don't press too hard, because what we want to do is make sure we can put more on over the top. And if you press really hard, it fills the paper up really quickly and you won't be able to get more on after. So just go lightly. So pastels is all about building up the layers and getting the levels of thickness going on. But to do that, you need to start off light. So you start off light touch, I mean, so don't press too hard. And then as you kind of build it up, you press a little harder as you go and you fill up the paper more. So that's pretty much where we need to get some of the darker tones in within the fur. Now I'm just going to work around the eye a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to use the tip of my pastel and not the side of it, because I want to get a sharper line. And just noticing where it's darker. Now I can come in and blacken this up even more later, but for now I just want to use this colour because if you go in hard with black now, you can't actually go darker later. So I like to leave myself space to add more darks later on as I go. Okay, so I'm just using the end of my pastel like I did with the charcoal, just using the pointy bit or the sharp bit, just to get a finer line in there and get that lovely little outline around the eye. And then you can kind of blur off the edges a little bit using the sides. And then we've got a darker outline around the iris as well, and then also around the pupil. So I'm just going to run around the edge of that. I might fill that in actually, because I can always change that as we go. And it's going to be a good foundation kind of colour. And then zhoosh a little bit of it around in that darker centre area of the iris as well, because that's sort of got shadow there. So this is what I'm looking for, is different areas of shadow. Okay, and we've also got a little line, like a little furrow in the brow above here. So I'm just putting darker marks where I can see little shadow areas. So that'll probably do for the darkest at this stage. I'm going to pop that back into my box now. And now I'm going to kind of work up in tone. So my next darkest one was blue. And just because I want to get a little bit of blue undertone happening in around those mid to dark tones. So I like the idea of blue. If you don't want to use blue, that's absolutely fine. You can try brown or something else. Just make sure it's a mid-tone. Purple would also be really lovely. Pop some blue in the eye because I can see blue in there. And just a little bit. So kind of in between where it's dark and where it's light. And get a little bit of blue in there just because it creates really lovely shadows and a nice painterly kind of style. Not too much. I'll pop that one back on as well. I'm also looking at this piece of chair or whatever that is that the dog's leaning on. I'm wondering, do we need to leave that in, or can we just make that all part of the fur? Yes.
That's actually the white fur of her neck.
That bit there?
Yeah. Underneath. Yep. She's got white fur there.
It looks like a leather lounge or something, Lynn.
No, our lounge suite is grey.
Okay, all right. Oh yeah, I'm looking closely. Okay, now, yep, I can see that.
It's a white collar.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the collar below it.
Not the collar, but the collar of white, the ring around her neck being a border collie. The
white here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. Cool, cool. Let's make that white then. And see, that's how bad my printout is, because I couldn't figure out what that was. But when I zoom in on my iPad picture, I can see very soft, wispy white hair around there. And then, yeah, okay, good. So let's do that. Bottom left corner is quite dark, isn't it? Because the white fur is sitting out over the top of it. So I'm going to darken that off now. Thank you, Lynn. And no, I know this is not a white pastel at all, but in the picture, it's the white fur is quite a mid sort of light tone. So I'm just going to use this sandstone-y colour to represent that at this stage. I can lighten it up if I want to as we go, but it's a good base neutral kind of colour to get in there. So cool. So that's that area there. So kind of highlighted that a little bit. And then when we come back over this section later, we can kind of put the hair back over the top of that a little bit and bring it around so it'll all kind of gel nicely together. All right. So, yeah, I can see that now. Makes sense. Down in here, so you can't really see it in the picture. She's got some white or light hairs coming up here on the side of the nose. So this colour is my sandstone kind of colour, and I'm using that as one of my lighter. I'm going to use that as my light at this point, and then we can brighten it up as we go. So I've got my darks in, I've got my blue in for some of the mid-tone. I'm going to pop a bit of this, let's stick a bit of this in here. So this will be your lighter tone, not your lightest. So not white, we're saving all of those for later. But just a bit of light tone through here. And then we've got a bit up through here. So see how I'm just pressing nice and light. I've got the pastel on its side. As I'm pulling it around, I'm looking at the direction of the hair and the way that it grows, so that it's sort of starting to pick up the texture and the movement of that. Pulling that across through there. And then around here on the forehead, it's lighter here, isn't it? We've got this lovely light section through there. So again, you can kind of see that it sort of curls out from between the eyes and then up and over the eyes. So it's like this little brow sort of effect going on in the direction of that curve. So pull your pastel in that direction. And because it's on its side, I'm getting a nice wide soft mark rather than the hard marks. If you're using the end of your pastel like this, then you'll get a harder line, and that'll be fine towards the end when you want to get more definition in your hairs. But at this point, we just want to keep it sort of soft and smooth and a bit fuzzy, because we're building up to that. Okay. Cool. So that's sort of all the lighter areas. There's a little bit above the eye there. And I can pop some of that also into the white of the eye. And again, I can change that colour as we go. So the nice thing about pastels is you can actually change the colours and add colours and blend them all on the paper. So just because you put one colour down doesn't mean it's kind of, that's it forever. You've got a fair bit of, you know, forgiveness if you want to change it. I'm going to put a bit of that in here too. You can see around the iris, you can see there's a little bit of that light creamy sort of colour, and again we'll come back and do more work on that. So that's pretty much all the papers nearly covered in, just about. What I'm going to do now is put that lighter tone, so that's one of my lightest tones. I'm going to go back down into my mid-tones again, and I've picked up my what's that colour, mustard sort of yellowy colour, and I just want to get a little bit of that in here. So I don't want the lights to be too light, and I do like to have a little bit of interest or variation in the colours, because when we start to mush all this together, it'll all come together nicely. So building up your layers and getting lots of lovely tone in here, or different tones or colours, will really give it a bit of depth. And that mustard's quite nice. I like what that does. So you can kind of mix them all together. I'm just kind of pulling this around the page and getting a nice range of colours on here. Remembering we're going to put all the lights in at the end. So if you feel like you haven't got enough of that yet, don't stress. We're also trying to stay loose today and not blending in too much. If I blend too much, it kind of then turns all muddy and gets a bit sort of dull. But if we try to keep the pastel nice and loose on the page, then it has this natural kind of look, and it's a lot easier to get those textures happening. So we'll try really hard not to blend. I'm not going to promise that I won't, because sometimes I can't help myself. Okay. Just moving my heater a bit closer. It's a bit chilly here today. All right, so that's looking okay so far. So you can see how we've kind of filled in all the background, and we've got all those lovely base colours down, and by layering them over each other, they sort of blend together, but they still remain, you know, nice and bright within their own colours. So it's kind of working really well. And depending on what colours you have and what you've chosen, you're going to have different impacts and different effects. I really like drama in my art. I really like to have bright, bright, brights and dark, dark, darks, because for me, that's what excites and delights me. And again, it's all about the tones. So, you know, if you don't feel like that, if you want to have something a little more muted and softer, then that's absolutely fine too. So basically so far we've put down our blue violet, so we've got our darkest down on there. You'll see most of that's kind of been pushed in or covered up a little bit now. That's okay, we can come back and put more in, there's no drama. I've done some blue because I like the blue, and that sort of works really nicely with the browns, and it's a good dark to mid-tone. And then we've got that lovely mustard sort of colour as well. Now, remember I picked up this muted green. It's kind of like an army green almost, and I can see a little bit of that in the fur too. So I just want to push a bit of that around as well and see what happens. I'm not going to commit to it yet 100%. Don't mind it. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of that around. And the nice thing is, if you don't like something and it doesn't really work, you can always add other colours over the top and change it, or mix it with something else and kind of get it to merge in together. This is what I really love about pastels, is just how you can kind of blend all the colours together beautifully over the top of each other, and you start to get these really nice combinations of colours that you can't buy, and you have to kind of make it on the paper. So that green is quite nice. It's sort of giving it a nice little tinge, and again it's a mid-tone, so essentially it doesn't really matter what colours you use, as long as they're the right tones in the right places, it'll all make sense. So a bit of green, yeah, cool. Remembering too that we're going to add black and darken up the dark bits afterwards. So, you know, if you feel like it's still a little bit too muted, don't stress. We'll sort that as we go. I do like this green though. How odd being putting green into a dog. But there you go. So you can see that by the way I've moved my hand and I've pulled the pastel around, that I'm starting to get a lot of the feeling of the direction of the fur. So up above the eye there, I've pulled it kind of out from the eye and up over the brow. So it's got this lovely curve or wave or shape to it. And then underneath the eye, it's kind of all pulling out from the eye again off to the left-hand side. So it's, think about what you're painting and the direction that it's going in, because that really does have a big impact on how it'll look in the end. Okay, so now I'm going to start to look again at my darker tones. This one I picked up before, I haven't used it yet. So that's the kind of the warm grey, and I can see a lot of that. Now I've got this beautiful underpainting of different colours happening here. I feel like I want to add some of this warm grey, which is kind of dark, just to darken up some of those lovely areas that need a bit more depth. And I can pull it through here. See up across here, we've got all those little light bits up through here, but there's dark in between. And so this maybe, hopefully, will be dark enough, or a nice dark mid-tone at least anyway, to get that looking nice. And then we've got a little bit of shape that comes around through here as well. So remember that this section above the eye into the brow. I'm going to have to put more dark down on here, but this is okay for now. And again, just looking at the shapes and the direction that everything's growing. So that's kind of muted everything down a little bit. It's made it all a bit more grey and a bit more sort of muddy. That's okay though, it's good. I'm coming around through here. And in a second, I'm going to put more dark in. So I'm going to pick up my blue violet again, and I'm going to start to add that back in again, because I want to kind of now thicken it up and get it nice and rich. Lovely. All right. So see how I'm trying to keep my mark very loose? So far I haven't blended anything. When I do blend, it'll be in the eye because I want to get that pupil really smooth and I want to get the iris nice and blended as well with those different tones that are in there. But for the moment, I'm going to try really hard not to. What I do need to do though is find a paper towel just so I can tip off my dust. So normally I have one sitting here, but I forgot to grab that. So I'm just going to grab a bit of paper towel. And so this is good if you're sitting down and your dust isn't dropping, because if you're on an easel, your dust will drop down into your little tray. But if you're sitting like this and it's flat on the table, you get a lot of dust on your page. And I've seen lots of people blowing it off, and it's very tempting to blow it. But when you do that, it kind of goes everywhere. And you can see how much dust I just tipped off then. And that's just after one little round. So I try to keep my dust all in one spot because it does spread all over your house. It's probably not the best thing to be breathing in either. So try to, have a towel or paper towel or something nearby that you can tip that off onto, and then later on you can pop it in the rubbish bin. Or you can save it and make new pastels. Yes, you can. Who knew? You can actually do that. So I used to save all my dust out of my tray off my easel and pop it into a little container. And then when I had enough, and it would just all end up like a muted grey kind of colour if you put all the same colours in together. And then I would mix it with some water, and you make like a clay out of it. So you don't need a lot of water, but it makes a clay kind of texture, and you can roll that into shape and then just let it dry. Just sit it out in the sun or on a table or somewhere, and it'll dry, and then you've got a new pastel. So you don't have to waste anything, which is kind of cool. All right, so let's get back to this. What I want to do now is I think we might focus on the eye, and then we'll work out from there and get a bit more definition into the fur and things. So the eye kind of sits inside the fur. It's the thing that's behind the fur. And I like to work usually from back to front. I find that a lot easier than, working in the front foreground and then having to get into the background. So everyone's got their own methods, but I find that probably the most simple way. And I'm always looking for a shortcut. So that's the eye. So let's get started on that. So what we want to look at first is the white of the eye, because it's actually behind all the other bits. And in this picture, you can see there's a slight little shadow on the white of the eye. Now, I've already put some of that sandstone-y kind of colour in there, and I know that's not quite right. And I didn't want to use white just yet, but what I'm going to do is pop a bit of white over the top of that, and that will kind of, it's not too white, but it'll just mute it down a little bit. Ooh, no, it didn't. Okay. And then on the other side, it's quite brown, isn't it? It's kind of murky in there, so I'm not going to put too much white in there. One moment, and I'm just going to push that in with my finger. So as I'm pushing it, one moment, I think there's someone at the door and the dog's having a little moment. I'll be back with you shortly. Apologies for that. Okay, so let's get stuck into this. So I was in the eye and just putting a little bit of white over that sandstone sort of colour in there. It's actually a little bit pinkish, isn't it? Just going to try, only because I'm too lazy to go and find a pink, a little bit of my green in there just to dull it down a bit. It's actually not that bright. But there is a slight shadow in there. If you can see on there, it's almost like a little stripe through the white there. So it's a reflection of something. So we don't want to make that super bright white because it's actually not. And I do need to go and get a pink now that I think about it. One moment. So it's interesting, as you start to paint, you kind of start seeing different colours and things in things. And this is, yeah, like a pinky skin sort of colour. So I'm just popping a little bit of that over the top again using the end of my pastel. So I just want to make a small mark. And I know I can come around the outline afterwards with my darks. Okay, so that is more pinkish, and then I'm just going to pop this little bit of this warm grey in there to try and soften off that colour and get that little bit of a shadow happening. These little details are important. If you don't put them in, then sometimes your painting doesn't make sense. So you've got to kind of notice those things, and sometimes you don't even know what they are, like around the collar area, but you just do what you see and then it'll all work out. Okay, so that's probably enough work in that area. The next thing we want to do is the iris. So I've already got some colour on there. I've put a little bit of mustard around the edge of the pupil in the iris, and then I've got some of that sandstony colour, and then I've got my orange paper underneath and a little bit of dark around the edge. So I'm just going to kind of merge those around gently. Now, if you go over the outlines of your eye and your pupil, don't stress, we can sharpen that up again after. Okay, so I just want to push all this in, get some colour on the paper first, and then we can start to add other colours over the top and make it come together. So you need to have pastel down already to kind of blend with. So if you haven't got enough on your paper, you might want to add a little bit more. So you've got to kind of have enough down on there to play with, basically. Now, once I've got that on there, I can see there's like that, I've got that khaki greeny colour around the edge. I'm going to pop a bit more of that on the outside. Pop a bit of that around there, because I know that when I mix that with a bit of orange, it'll go sort of brown and dirty, and that's what I'm looking for. I kind of want a brownish tinge going on through there. By using the colours I've used in the fur, it sort of combines everything and keeps it all connected. So now I've pushed that through. So I've just blended that with my finger, just rub it around again in the shape of the eye. So we want a lovely smooth eye here. And keep it nice and smooth and glassy. So we don't want all these loose looking sections like we've got in the hair. This section is different. It's lovely and smooth. So you've got to think about the texture of the thing that you're painting. Nice and smooth. And then I've got a bit of orange, so I'm going to zhoosh that around. I can see there's sort of orange all around through here. Okay, so I'm pressing pretty hard. I've got a short piece, so I'm just putting it on its side so I get more down in a quicker way. I don't want hard, sharp lines. I want to kind of keep everything sort of smooth and fuzzy. Okay, so see how that's now gone on to the top of it. And if I just dab it gently, it will just sort of keeps the color there, but it softens off all the edges around it. So it's not too defined around the edges. Because this eye it's got kind of a dark edge around the outside of it, which we'll pop in a minute. But the middle of it around the pupil area has like a greeny browny tinge. And then we come out into this lovely orangey sort of color. And then I'm going to pop a little bit of this terracotta, no, what's this called? Sandstony sort of light, just a squiggle of that. See, I'm just popping that around the edges there. Can you see that little bit of light in that orange area? So just putting that little shape in there and then dabbing it in with my finger. Just gently, just dab it. Don't rub it too much or you'll lose the definition of it. So when you want to do something like this, we don't want it to be a hard, sharp line like that because that's a bit too bright, although I don't mind it. But if I wanted to, I need to soften that off a little bit, but I don't want to blur it away completely because if you blend it too much, it'll just get lost with the other color. So what I want to do is just dab it lightly with my finger like that. Just dab, dab, dab. and that will sort of leave it on the surface but soften off the edges. See how that's just kind of sitting there now? It's nice. And then I'm just going to darken up again around the pupil because it feels like it needs to be a bit darker in there. Maybe I need to get a darker brown. Funny how I never even had a brown in that selection of colours. I think I do. I'll go and get one. Okay, so this is a dark brown umber kind of colour. That's nice. Yeah, so I don't want this to be as dark as the pupil because it needs to sort of stand out and be the darkest part, but I still want it to get a little bit more dark around it. So I've got more contrast in the eye, colour of the eye. Okay. So I've just put a little bit down. I'm using the end of it so I don't get it too smudgy because I've just got a small area where I want to put it. And then I can, again, just dab it gently. You might have to wipe your finger off in between dabs, just so that you don't mix the colours up too much. But yeah, that's nice. That's good. So that's worked out nicely. And again, if I want to come back in and brighten up this little shiny bit here, I can do that. A bit more of this sandstone kind of colour. And again, just dab. So you kind of get to know what gestures or what movements to use when you want to do different things with pastels, and just depends on the outcome that you're after and how hard you want a color to look or how blurred and soft you want it to be as to how you move your fingers. So now I'm going to, around the outside of the iris, yes, is dark. So I've just grabbed this dark brown, so I'm going to stay with that one. And I'm just going to kind of outline the edges of the iris with that. So see how that kind of sharpens it up nicely now. And the shadow in the white of the eye here starts to make a bit more sense because I've defined this edge. So I'm going to gently, gently draw a line around there, like that. Just using the end of my pastel. So I'm using the tip of it, which gives me a finer line and a bit more control. Okay. And then what I want to do next is blur the edges in towards the eye. So when you grab your finger, see if I can show you without getting my hand in the way. Grab a finger, put the pad of your finger down on the line that we just drew, and then gently pull it in. Wipe it off, and then again, pull it in. So what I'm trying to do is just soften off those little edges around there, like that, and pull it in towards the eye so that it starts to kind of look like it's rounded. Make sense? And if you feel like you need to add a bit more brown or another colour just to give it a bit more contrast, then do that too. So I'm just putting a bit more on. I feel like I haven't got enough. I just want to pull it in a bit more. See how that's coming in now around the eye, and it's starting to look like a ball rather than a flat thing. So it's all about how you kind of blend your colours and the direction you pull them in. Yeah, that's good. That's looking nice. And then we get to this point, oh, damn, it's not as orange as I wanted it. So you can come back in and you can add a bit more orange over the top if you want to, just to brighten it up even more. Because this is the focal point of the picture. So we can do that and just get a bit more colour into the eye like that. Nice. And dab it again. Sometimes dabbing will get rid of the dust. It kind of sticks to your finger and then you can wipe it, or you've got to tip it off again, which I will do now. Just tip this up onto my little paper towel here. Give it a little bang. The dust, for some reason, it doesn't always all blend in, which is sort of annoying. Just trying to straighten that up properly. There we go. Yeah, for whatever reason. And different pastels have different dust and different paper too. So this Colourfix paper, because it's quite gritty, will cause a lot of dust, whereas a pastel matte paper, which doesn't have the grit, that holds lots and lots of layers, won't create as much dust because it seems to hang on to more of the pigment. So it just depends on what paper you're using as well. Combination of everything. Okay, so now we've got all that bit done. I'm just going to rub in this pupil a bit more, push that in. When you want to darken something off or blend it, you just push a bit harder. See how that went nice and dark? And now I can come back over that with my bit of blue, I think. I'm going to pop a bit more blue in there. And then I'm going to outline it in black. So just a tad more blue. This needs to be quite dark, this one, this section. If you look at your black and white picture, you can see the pupil is one of the darkest areas in the whole thing, except for the shiny bit on there. But it's quite dark in tone. So remember that, you need to keep it dark. Even though it looks blue, you've got to make it nice and dark blue. Okay. And then the darker that is, then the light that we put in afterwards, the little shine, is going to pop. That'll be beautiful. Okay. So I've got that in my blue. What I'm going to grab next is a black pencil because I want to put the outline around it in black. And I could do it in pastel, like I could use a stick of pastel like this and just find the end or the edge and draw around it like that. That works. But you might find you'll have more control with a pencil. So if you have pastel pencils, don't use graphite, they won't work with pastel. But if you have a pastel pencil, you just have a bit more control when you want to do the finer work like this. And it's easier to manage and see what you're doing. When you're holding a short, stumpy piece of pastel like this and you're trying to do fine lines, you can't kind of see over your hand sometimes. It gets quite tricky. And then sometimes you'll put it too far out or put it in the wrong place. And so it's easier to use a pencil just for the fine work. Well, in fact, you can do entire pastel drawings with pencils. Pastel pencils are the best. All right. Now I'm noticing on the picture, even though the eye's got this gorgeous blue glow to it, there's kind of a dark rim around it. So that's what we're doing now with the pencil. I think this is actually a dark blue. It's not black at all. Anyway, it seems to be doing the job, so that's okay. But down on the bottom, see on the left side of this pupil, it's darker in there. So this is where I'm going to add a bit more black. Yeah, that was a dark blue pencil. I can tell now because I put black next to it and it's much darker. But I've popped a bit of black in there because that's going to, again, help me to give the eye some form. So if you put a little bit of black on that left-hand side there of the pupil, and there's actually a bit of dark. Actually, I'm going to run it around the top as well because the eyelid's casting shadow. A bit of black through up here. I've used pastel, but if you have pencil, that's fine too, or charcoal. And then I'm just going to soften that edge off a little bit because what that is like a shadow. I'm just softening it off with my finger, kind of merging it in with the dark of the iris. So see how now the edges are nice and soft and you can't actually see where the blue and the black meet. So I wanted that to be softer, but a bit more of the black on the top and left because we've got shadow from the eyelid coming over that there, which we'll do next. Okay, so that's my eye. And I think I might just leave that as it is. I can always come back afterwards and just touch up in some spots if we need to brighten anything up, but I might just leave that where it is for now and we'll move on. So you can always get back into different spots and tidy things up afterwards. I just find it easier if I don't have to, that's all. Just pulling that through there. Lovely. All right, so that's the inside of the eye done, and now we've got to do the outside. We might need to do the lid of the eye and the outline of it, and then we can come out and finish off all that beautiful fur. All right, so I'm going to grab my blue violet first, and then if that's not dark enough, I can know I've got black up my sleeve, basically. So this is a blue violet pastel stick. You might want to try even a bit of charcoal would work, or a charcoal pencil might be nice. Again, you'd have more control over a pencil. So if you prefer charcoal or pastel pencil, then go for it. Actually, charcoal's nice. I'm going to stick with that now that I've said it. So what we're doing is the outline of the eye. We want to go up here into the area just inside this right-hand top section. You can see there's a little dark bit there. It's like a little dark shape. So we want to darken that off in there. And if this isn't dark enough, I can come back with black afterwards and darken it off. And now we want to bring up the edge of the lid of the eye. So we want to kind of come over the top of the eye. I'm going to sharpen up that top section there and bring it all the way down through there. See how that's created a little lid now? And then we want to kind of thicken that up a bit. So it's quite thick through there. There we go. So that's a nice top lid. And then we can kind of wisp some of that up, although it's not working so well with charcoal. It's a bit dusty, but you can kind of do some little hairs on there afterwards with darker pastel pencil or pastel, and that'll give it more form. But for now, we'll stick with this part. And then we're going to come down around the outside of the eye here. So down on the left side, just draw your line down around the edge. It's got a very hard line around the eye there. Okay, so we need to make sure we get that nice and crisp through there. And when we do that, like now I've put my dark next to the white of the eye, I'm thinking, oh, that white is way too white. It definitely needs to go darker. And so this is where, at this point, you can go, okay, let's just darken that off a little bit. Because sometimes you think something's light and it's not. So I'm going to dab a little brown on there and just push it in, okay? Because it's in shadow and it's at the back of the eye and it doesn't stand out nearly as much as you imagine it does, or I imagined it does. So we need to push that off into the distance. Blend it in, push it away. The other really cool thing for blending are these rubber tipped blenders. So if you can get your hands on something like this, they come in different shapes and have different tips. It's a Montmartre brand. For Montmartre, they're pretty good. I wouldn't use their pastels or paper, but these things are okay. And they're quite good for blending little areas like this. So if you want to blend in that little bit of white of the eye with the brown, you can use your rubber tip blenders. There's a few different brands around. These are just the cheapy ones, but they're quite good. They do the job okay. The other thing you can use are cotton buds too. They're not too bad for blending. Okay, so I've blended that in. Now I'm just going to ditch the charcoal and pick up a pastel pencil. First I've got to get this dust off because it's driving me crazy. It's so annoying when there's dust in the way. Okay. Now I've just picked up this dark blue pastel pencil, which probably is not dark enough, but I'm going to stick with that for now and run my pencil around the edge of the eye. So what we want to do is create a really nice edge of the eye. I'll have to go and get black. This isn't enough. Okay. You can see where that's going now. So see how that just makes the eye pop. When we put the little shine in there, it's just going to make a world of difference. I'll just grab a black pencil. Do I have one here? Yep. Okay, so I'm back. Got a black pencil and I'm just going to run that around the edge again. I'll get this really strong and lovely. And then through here. So at the top on the right of the eye, we've got quite a large area of lid just there. It's a different sort of shape, and then it tapers off as it heads off around to the other side. But it's quite thick here. And then it goes down into that little tear duct shape through there. So that's like a triangular shape down through there. And then it ducks around here. And again, we have quite a thick line across the bottom of the eye. So I'm just going to grab my pastel because it's a thicker stick and I can get a wider mark on there. When you want a dark, wide mark like this, you just want to press hard. Just be sure you're putting it in the right spot. Press nice and hard and it'll get really thick and dark. Okay, so the harder you press, the more intense the colour. And then when you press lovely and light, it's nice and light. So see how that's darkened that off all the way around there. And then I'm just going to pull it down because you can see there's little sort of dark hairs coming out of that area on the bottom of the eye into the fur. So if you get your little bit of pastel, pop it on the edge of the eye that you just drew, and then pull it down a little bit into the hair area like this. And it kind of gives it that lovely folded look, like it's sunken back into the fur. And then the lighter fur will come over the top when we do that in a minute, and it'll kind of bring the fur forward. So same across the top. I'm just going to do soft little furry bits from out of the top of the eye, like that. And the other cool thing to notice is the reflection of eyelashes. Now, I don't know if you can see them on your print, your picture, but there are little eyelashes just down in here. I'll show you where they are through here. I'm just going to do some soft little lines. Just do a couple of little ones on there to reflect the eyelashes on the eye. It's not much detail, and it's very soft, but it all contributes to making this look genuine and real. Okay, cool. Now there's also quite a lot of tone and shadow and stuff going on around here. So I'm just going to sharpen that up a little bit more. And then you see on the bottom of the eye, along the lid line, the dark line there, we've got that lovely white shine. There's a little white shine on there. So again, that's going to give the eye more texture and bring it forward. First, I'm going to tip off dust again. So the eye looks like it's sticking out from everything else at the moment because it's the darkest thing. It's the thing that's got all the light and all the dark in it. And then everything else around it, all the fur, is just kind of a mid-tone, blur. So what we need to do is get a bit more dark into the fur, and then that will give it a bit more body and bring it all alive and join it all together. So if you want to, I tend to hold off, but if you want to, you can get a bit of light into the eye now. So we can do that and see. This is the kind of gives me a bit of joy. Sometimes you get to this point in a painting and think, oh no, this is not working. And you get a little bit disillusioned because it's starting to, be a drag. But if we give ourselves a moment of joy and pop a bit of light in where the light is, it just kind of gives you that, oh, yay, feeling, and then you can carry on. So let's do that. All right. So remember I said across the bottom of the eye here, I might use pencil actually. If you have a white pencil, that's probably going to be a better option. I've got a white charcoal pencil, which works just as nicely as pastel pencil. And see across the bottom of the eye, we've got that lovely white shine, but it's not a full line, it's a broken line, okay? So what you want to do is you want to press down, press hard, then lift. and carry on with the line, but vary the pressure as you go around. And that'll give you kind of light and dark sections that you can touch up afterwards if you want to. But it just means that you're not making one continuous line that is all the same width. Okay. And then you can do a few little dotty shapes. Just look at the shape of the shine on there. And you can do a few little dots and break it up a little bit. So it looks natural. So always think about how things look naturally and the shine. And then when you want to brighten it up even more, you can press a bit harder. So the dog's here, she wants some loving. Okay, so it's a broken line and it's got funny little shapes and things in it. So don't make it a hard straight line because that's not what it actually is. And as I said, pencils will be the best thing to use for that. Cool. And then when you want to do the dot in the eye, the actual in the pupil, I'm just going to mark it out lightly with my pencil because I want to kind of figure out where it's going to be. I'm not pressing very hard at this point. I'm just going to go lightly. If you go lightly, then you kind of give yourself enough space to undo something if it's not quite right. And then there's another little dot just down below the halfway line, about there. So I can press a little bit harder with my pencil and put that on. That's cool. And then go back into this one. Now you might want to use pastel. Things like schminky pastels are really nice for this sort of thing because you just touch it on and it sticks. This makes this lovely bright white spot. See how that brings the eye alive? Suddenly now it's got light and it's alive and there's a bit of a shine in there. I'm just going to softly lighten up a little bit of this shine in the iris as well. There we go. So that's now brought that to life. It just feels like it's really, really there now. I'm just going to tidy up with my black pencil the edge of my pupil a little bit. Just feel like I need to define that a little bit more. So this is where you can kind of come back in afterwards and tidy everything up once you get to this stage and check everything is all where it needs to sit. Cool. Now we'll get back into the fur. So we've kind of done the eye because that's behind all the fur or underneath all the fur. And now we can get back in there and start to really build that up and get it nice and thick and rich. Okay. So remember I said before we want to continue some of this black down underneath. So then we can put the lighter colours over the top and get the density and the thickness of it going on. So I'm going to use a bit of black, but not too much. I just want to sort of, again, on its side, softly blending it around like that, so that you're starting to create a bit of depth. See how that's now starting to kind of tie in with the eye and look like they sort of belong together because we've got this common tone going on. And it'll start to make more sense. Unless, of course, you've got a light coloured dog, but it'll depend on the dog's fur. And again, remember to pull your pastel around in the direction of the hair. So look at which way it's growing. Just up in this top right corner. So I'm just going to work my way around the picture and touch on some black just to get some depth going on. You can see how that's changed it already. It's really starting to come alive now. Don't forget we've got white to put up here in the eye of the, not the eye, the tear duct area too. We'll do that after. We'll get the fur in first because we'll put the little light bits in afterwards, or the shiny bits of fur. So just smushing around some of the black. If you don't want to use black, there might be another dark colour that you'd like to use. I think the black's nice because it's giving it that lovely depth. And where you want it to be darker, so if for instance, on this left-hand side here, you could darken that up and push it in nice and hard. So that area there is sitting underneath the fur that's coming over the top of it. So think about that as well. Like what sits where and in what order. So just finding all your dark spots, pretty much, like we did in the very beginning. Remember, we blocked in all the darks. So we're doing that again, but we're using black. And you can come back in with your blue violet again. See, it's all starting to come together nicely now. Nice and dark through there. Have a little bit of black up through here. And then coming out from the eye. So look at the hair from there in the front here. That's sort of all sprouting out from there. So just kind of pulling it in that direction to get the feeling of the texture of the fur. So that little eye is coming alive nicely. I've just noticed a kink in the actual eye, so I'm going to tidy that up. And see how you can come back in and tidy things up as you go. Just because you've done it once doesn't mean you can't go back and redo it. It's what I love about pastels. It's so forgiving. You can redo things. You can literally wash all this off and start again if you want to. So now I've got a lovely bit of dark in there that's really starting to create some emphasis and depth, which is what we want. And I'm going to come back in now with my mid to light tone. So that's this. I'm going to pop a bit of that light in here, that beautiful golden shiny fur that's around here, just on the top right of the eye. And again, pulling that around in the direction that it's growing. So it's kind of sprouting out of the front and then it kind of sweeps across over the top of the front of the eye. Like that. And as I'm pulling it, it's on its side. So I've got the pastel on its side, but sometimes if you have a little edge on there, like it might be a square stick, but sometimes you can make an edge when you use them a fair bit. You get a little bit of a sharp edge or a flat side. And so you can actually use that to make lines as well. So there's lots of different ways you can move your pastel around on your paper to create different effects. It's just figuring out, how to do that, and it's almost it's like a brush almost, and you just find ways to get different shapes and edges on your sticks of pastel. So that's that lovely glow over there, and then over here on the left of the eye, remember we put it in earlier, so I need to add a bit more of that now because we've got some stuff underneath it, so we can kind of build up on that a little bit. And then when you need finer hairs or finer lines, you just use the tip of the pastel. So there's so many ways that you can manipulate and move this around to create different effects. And I love that we haven't blended too much today. It's all kind of a bit loose and lovely. So that's that nice little light section through here. And I know if I need to, I can bring in some yellow or white, really lighten that up even more. So it's nice to leave room for yourself to do that. Up on the left there, there's a few little shiny, loose, singular hairs. You can just do soft little marks like that to indicate those. So left-hand side, I'm just using the edge of the pastel, that's flat edge. It's got a nice sharp side to it. That gives me a long stroke, but a soft one as well. So there's that one. And then so we've got lots of little short hairs too around the eye. So we might go and have a look at them now. So around above the eye, I've got a few little short lines in here. See those guys? So that just adds a little bit of highlight to that area and also indicates the direction that the hair is growing. And then on the nose, so to the right of the eye, we've got little short ones that come out here too. So see, again, that's going to tell us where the hair is growing and what direction it is, and even what it feels like. So this hair here is shorter and probably a little bit spikier than the bigger, longer, soft hairs. And then we come down through here. I've got a few little light ones that come down. So see how I'm just sort of layering my strokes over each other and building up that lovely depth. So that's creating a lovely, lovely hairy feel. I keep forgetting to wipe my pastel off in between marks, because what happens is I'm putting it down. So I put it down like that, and then it picks up the dark, and then I put it down, it puts the dark down again. So paper towel, again, is a wonderful thing to have nearby, because you can just wipe that off, give it a good clean, and then you've got a nice clean stick of pastel to get pure colour down with. Lovely. Okay, so not too much more to do. I do want to just darken up on the right-hand side here. So I'm just going to get my mid-tone grey and just thicken this up a little bit more through here. And then drag a little bit of that in as well, just to give it that lovely continuous kind of feeling. And then I'm going to pop a bit more of that over through here as well. So same sort of thing, you can use it on its side and just get those lovely wispy hair shapes over the top of all the other colours we've already put down. And then we're going to reassess in a minute and just see where we need to darken and lighten, and then we'll be done. Beautiful. Okay. Good. So there's our Bailey, nearly done. We'll have lots of pet portraits now then. All right, I'm just going to, I just noticed in the eye here, it's a little bit of more browny grey. So see how we're just now starting to sort of touch things up and go back and check and see what's going on, varying the colours and things. Nice, nice. I'm picking up the dark here under my eye, so just want to make that a bit wider through there. All these things make a difference. It's better. And down underneath. Lovely, lovely. Then we've got to put this lovely little bit of shine here in the tear duct area. But first we'll stick a bit more dark in. I just want to darken up again with a bit more black. So through here. And again, I'm just using it on its side. So lovely soft little marks. We don't want hard marks that sort of define and sort of take over everything. We want to kind of now blend it all in nicely together. Just to get a few more dark patches in there. So see how you just kind of keep adding over and over again, layer, 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 until it looks the way you want it to. And then remember, we've got these lovely white hairs, soft white hairs down through here. I'm just going to use my sandstone sort of colour, wiping it off in between, if I remember, to get that lovely soft, wispy sort of hair happening, actually hanging more vertically than on an angle. There we go. And now we're just going to put in the tiny little bit of lights at the end, so the lightest light. So that's when you save your white for last. I'm just going to see what yellow does when I pop it in here. Sometimes yellow is a nicer option than white, especially for things like fur. See if that makes it shine, doesn't it? It's a lovely glow. Bit of warmth. I'm going to pop a bit of, this is pale yellow. Haven't used it till now. So that's nice in there, but we'll just give that a little bit of shine. Sometimes white is a bit too milky, and so the yellow is a nice little warmth. Put that here on the left of the eye as well, where there's a little bit of shine on the fur. That's nice, just warms it all up, lovely. And then I can put some white where I can see those whiter, lighter sections. Yellow in the eye as well. Too much. Smush it in. There we go. Okay, and then we've got white. So we've been saving our white for last. This is the lightest you can go. So you can't go whiter than white, which is why I don't use it until I absolutely need to. If we hadn't put the shine on the eye, then we'd be doing that now, because we want to save the best for the end. But just here on the inside of the eye, where the tear duct is, there's a little smush of white through there. So I'm just going to press lightly with my white. I always find it better to press light first, and then if you feel like you need to add more, you can. Easy to put it on and get it off. So just go lightly, lightly. Add a little bit of shine through there. It's nice. And this is not a big smooch of colour. It's kind of all broken up into little different shapes. So just dab it into the shapes gently, gently. Get those little shapes that you want. I'm going to have a crack at whitening up this white in my eye as well. There we go. That's even whiter. And then see the little hairs up above the eye here. So we've got quite a lot of light hairs through there. So I'm just going to use my white, just the end of it now, because I want to get those soft, light, wispy hairs through there. Like that. So that just brightens up that area there. You can see the lights bouncing off there. So lovely glossy doggy. A few little bright sections over there. And you could potentially pop a few of the light marks in through this area here on the left under the eye, just to get a few little more highlights through that. Just a couple of bright bits. So now's the time to stand back from your painting. If you've been sitting and looking at it, straight down, get up off your chair and step back and have a look at it, because that's when you'll start to see what you might need to add or change. Everything is better from a distance, and that's the other reason I like to stand at an easel usually, because then I can step back all the time and just keep checking my work. I probably spend more time stepping back and looking at it than I do actually doing it. But it's a really good exercise, because it means you can see what you're doing as you go, and you just get a better view, really. So when you're working like this at a table, it's a lot harder to really see what's happening in perspective. So it's good to stand up and walk away. I just want to add a little bit of shadow under here, because I didn't stand up, but I've got this on a screen in front of me, so I can look at that, which is what you can see. And there's a little shadow just up here on the right of the eye under the lid, and that needs to continue through to the other side. So I've just used a tiny bit of charcoal to do that. And charcoal is good because it's not too black. Just gives me that nice kind of shadow effect. Yeah, that made a massive difference. So just through here, you need to darken that off a little bit in there if you haven't already. And carry that through, because we've got shadow down on this side where the eyelashes are. Okay. And then you can kind of just run around your picture touching up things, darkening, lightening, widening, whatever you need to do. Always good to check it from a distance. Or the other thing you can do, if that doesn't work, take a photo of it. So grab your phone and hover that over the top of your painting. Take a photo of it and then look at it in your camera, in your phone. And it's amazing what you see that you don't realise. Photos are awesome because you see an awful lot. And I'm just going to pop a few more little light here. So just checking back at my reference picture, noticing where things are. I've got quite a bit of my original orange paper or terracotta paper showing through. I don't mind that though, it's quite nice. So I haven't filled it all in, and it's got a nice little undertone tinge to it. And don't forget these little hairs down here on the left that sort of sit over the collar. They kind of wisp over the top of that there. So I'm just doing using my pastel pencil. A few little soft hairs. They're not all the same length or shape either, so make sure you vary the length of those. And I think we're just about there. Do. Lovely. So we're going to wind up in a minute and see how everybody went. Beautiful. Now, if you want to do any more video classes of mine, I've got loads on my website. If you see photos from a class that we've done online and you can't find the video for it, give me a hoy. I do record all of them, but they're not all on my website because there's too many. So if you are interested in doing any more and you can't find it, let me know and I'll organise to get that to you. And thank you for joining me. Don't forget to sign your painting too. That's always important. So when you get to the end, either a charcoal or pastel pencil will do the job nicely. Then if you want to frame it, you can give it a little bit of a spray with fixative, or failing that, if you don't want to spray it, and spraying will actually dull the colours a lot. So I don't like to spray my final layers. Just tipping off the dust again. Yeah, so if you don't want to spray and you do want to kind of try to push in some of the loose pastel dust, get yourself some glassine paper. See if I can find a bit and show you. So glassine paper is really good. It protects your artwork. So when you're storing it, you can pop glassine over the top and it'll stop it from smudging. And it also is a really nice way of pushing the pastel dust into your paper. So this is a used piece, obviously it's a bit dirty, and it wipes clean too. So I wanted to wipe that off. Just get a little towel and give it a wipe, and that makes it nice and clean again. And then you can use that over your painting. So this piece isn't big enough, but if I had a piece that size, put it over your painting like this, and then literally just rub with your fist, or some people like to use a credit card or something with a hard, flat surface like a ruler, like that. Just get a little cloth and rub that around. But what that does is it pushes the dust into the paper, so you don't have loose dust sitting on the surface, which is less chance then of the dust dropping down into a frame once you've framed it, or getting it all over everything. So that's a really good little hint if you want to do that. Alrighty, so we're going to wind up there. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you've had a lovely class, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bye for now.